Welcome to Chair Shots to the Cranium Interviews. I'm Stephen Goforth. I have the privilege of interviewing a man who is no stranger to the world of professional wrestling. He's worked for major wrestling promotions such as TNA Impact, WCW, ECW, and the WWE. He's currently on the independent circuit, and he calls Universal Championship Wrestling his home. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Johnny Swinger. Johnny, I want to thank you for taking time to speak with me.
Oh, Stephen, thank you for having me on, man. I love the name, too. Chair Shots to the Cranium. That's a great name.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. Johnny, before we jump...
It's something I don't do anymore, by the way.
Well, Johnny, before we jump into what you're doing currently in professional wrestling and some of your experiences in the business, let's discuss the prequel, if you will, to Johnny Swinger. Tell the fans about how you got started in professional wrestling. What drew you to it, and how did this journey begin for you?
Well, it's a great story. I'm going to try to condense it here. I saw it on TV, as a kid, like a lot of people. I was maybe around 7 or 8 years old, and I think maybe a couple years after that, I went to go see it in person, at the old Buffalo Memorial Auditorium there, and that's when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and that's when I was just blown away by it, just amazed at what, a guy, Iron Sheik, go in the ring and get on the microphone and tell everyone to be quiet, and they all make noise and scream at him. I'm like, man, this is great, it's like for a kid, that's what you want to do. You want to jump around and go nuts.
Right, exactly.
And that's it. I was faithful on TV, watching on TV every week, and something really strange happened. Maybe 2 or 3 years later, my parents split up when I was like a baby, and my mother raised me pretty much, and she worked several jobs. She was working a bartending job, and she came home one night, and I was about 12, and she goes, "You're not going to believe this. I met a gentleman. He's really nice, and he says that he puts up the ring for the WWF." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding."
Wow.
She's like, no. He's, introduced me to him, and, eventually they got together, right? And that's the whole, this man, his name was Tony, but he grew up with Tony Parisi in Italy. Like, they were childhood friends. They came over on the boat together to Canada, like in the early 60s, and he was, worked for him, putting up the ring, and that's kind of how I got involved. And I started putting up the rings when I was 12, 13 years old, and, did that all through high school, all throughout Canada and New York State. And once I turned 18, that's when I went and got trained, to actually go in the ring and be a wrestler.
Wow. Now, did you debut what, 1993-ish, somewhere in there?
Yeah, I did the training. I trained for about 8 or 9 months in '93. I think maybe towards the end of '93 when you'd say I had my first official match, I think, up there outside of Toronto somewhere. After in '94 is when I really started to, there was actually a lot more places to wrestle back then up in Canada. They still had, like, territories. You could still go out to East Canada with the Maritimes. Old Neil Dupree, Rene Dupree's dad, was still running. And there was still, the Hearts were still running out in Calgary, some stuff. So I started in Winnipeg. Me and Edge and Christian and Joe Legend, we all broke in together, and we started working out in Winnipeg. That's where we started doing most of we do tours out there, like 2-3 weeks at a time. They're like Indian reservations and places like that. So that's really where I started.
Nice.
Hey,
so
buddy.
You said, you mentioned the name Tony Parisi, and that's your uncle, correct?
Well, he's not my blood uncle, but like I said, basically the man that I knew as a father, him and Tony were childhood friends, grew up, so he was like an uncle to me, and
gotcha.
That was my introduction to the business, as a kid. So that story got spun through the years, but he wasn't my actual uncle, but he really was my introduction to wrestling. I mean, he had owned a motel and restaurant in Niagara Falls, Canada, and I'd go over there, I was 13, 14 years old in the summertime and just hang out at his pool, because he had a pool, and my gosh, I'd look over and Dino Bravo would be laying out. I'm like, oh my God, that's Dino Bravo, this is crazy.
Oh, so cool.
That's kind of how I grew up, just being around and bringing jackets back, bringing beer into the locker room, all that stuff.
That's so cool. That's a great story. Now, Johnny, you currently work with Universal Championship Wrestling. You've been with UCW since its birth in 2003. Why have you had such longevity with UCW?
Well, I'd have to say probably because I'm easy to work with, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I always try to be a good businessman and do what they ask you to do and do it the best that I can. And UCW, as far as being independent, it is a pretty long-running independent. There aren't too many that can say they've been around that long. There may have been a couple years here and there that were dormant, but for the most part, I can remember back to those early shows, and that's what I remember is that for an independent, it actually is a pretty major league looking production. You got 7, 8 matches, 9 matches on these shows, and every match has got a high caliber, named talent in it. And you just don't see that because I work for other groups as well, but nothing like that where it's really marquee matches throughout the card, and there's always a big crowd, and crowds always way into the show, and it's like it really stands out as I think it's one of the best out there, if not the best.
So it's safe to say that's how they separate themselves from other wrestling promotions. They just put on a better show, better talent, things like that.
Yeah, like I said, the only ones I do, other independent shows, is usually me and maybe Buff, maybe one other named guy. Sometimes it's just me. But the UCW show, like I said, there's 10, 12, 13 guys on there that were all superstars, so it really is like I put it up there, and the crowds that they draw are just as good, if not better, than these Impact guys and Ring of Honor and all that. So I really think that probably TV is the next step for them, now that it's back in full swing.
I agree. I've been very impressed with them. I think they put on a fantastic show, ran very well.
Yeah.
Very, very excited to see where they go. Now, I have a statistic I found very interesting, and that's that you've held the UCW Universal Heavyweight Championship on several occasions, and you had a very long title reign. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong here, you had to relinquish the title due to moves to WWE, TNA Impact, but you were never really defeated for the championship just until recently by Scott Steiner at Memorial Mayhem. And that's very, very impressive. How did it feel to finally take a loss for that championship? And tell us about your long title runs with UCW.
Well, man, you know your history. Now that you bring all that up, I actually kind of do remember all that now. That I was the champion with TNA, and that I was half of the tag team champs in TNA, and they made us sign contracts, and then we had to stop doing independent shows. So that was that one, and of course signing with WWE, you're not allowed to breathe, without their permission.
Right.
But the recent match with Scott Steiner at the Cobb County Civic Center, which drew a big crowd, really wasn't the advertised match.
Right. Exactly.
I went there thinking I'm wrestling Carlito, who I knew from WWE days, and never had a match with him. And that was the match that was promoted. That was the match that I did interviews on, and that we hyped at the actual arena a couple weeks before. And then when I got there, all of a sudden, like in wrestling, they say card subject to change. Wow. Yeah. That's really what happened. They just decided Teddy Long was in charge of the show, and he decided he was going to let Scott Steiner do whatever he wanted out of fear or something. I don't know. That's what happened.
Yeah, Teddy definitely threw a curveball on that one.
And I was on the receiving end of that.
Absolutely, yeah. Teddy absolutely threw a curveball to everybody on that one. Now, I'm sure you have your sights set on regaining that championship again. What do you have planned to get the title back around your waist where I know you feel it belongs?
Well, I think I got to get. Me and Carlito had a couple rematches since then, and I think I got to get past him in a strong way. I think we may be wrestling again coming up soon here, and that may be a number one contender match. So that's probably what's going to take. I have to get past Carlito pretty decisively, and then hopefully they'll start hyping a single match with me and Scott Steiner again.
Well, I hope so. It'll be a great match if we can see that. Let's talk a little bit about your time with WCW. How did this happen? How did you get hooked up with WCW, and what was your experience like there?
Well, that's the thing with wrestling. One thing leads to another, and like where I said, I started out in Winnipeg, Canada. I was out there doing these tours up near the Arctic, pretty much. I think I was about 19 years old, and I got a call from a guy named Scott D'Amore, who people probably recognize his name now. but nobody would have back then. And he just called me and said, "Hey, I've seen you on some of these Winnipeg TV shows," because they had their own TV out there. And he goes, "You got a good look and a good physique, and I know you're a young guy, but you seem pretty experienced." Even at 19, I was, because I grew up. I was out there, 12, 13 years old, around the ring and stuff. And he goes, "Would you be interested in doing TV for WCW?" And absolutely, and he booked me down in Macon, Georgia, for my first TV, and it just kind of snowballed from there. They took a liking to me, like J.J. Dillon, who was one of the Office guys, and Terry Taylor. They took liking to me, and next thing you know, I was booked every couple of weeks with them. This is like 95, 96, and started to get a little frustrated around the end of maybe early 97, though, thinking, man, they're never going to sign me, right? Because they pay me by the night and doing a good job, but there's nothing really happening. And then, boom, that's when they called me and said, we're going to give you a 3-year contract. And my money went bigger than, I could have ever imagined, for being 21 years old. And I was there until late 99, doing really well from what I thought, but still a young guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wanted bigger, wanted more. Jericho left, and he was one of my role models from Canada. He was out there in those Winnipeg shows where I started, and I saw how great he was doing. And Edge and Christian were up there doing the vampire thing and showing me their pay stubs, and I'm like, man, I need to get some of that. And that's I asked for my release from WCW to go to the WWF at the time, and I had about 6 months where it looked like they were going to sign me, but they just didn't for whatever reason. And that's when Raven, who was a friend of mine, gave me a call and said, "You should come to ECW." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding! I've watched that stuff, right? That's not for me. I'm not a,
yeah.
chairs and all this stuff." He's, no, you come in here and you're coming off WCW. You'll be a bad guy right off the bat. They'll hate you. You have all kinds of heat. And he was right. I went in there and boom, right away I had a good TV spot there.
Yeah,
WCW led to ECW.
You tagged with Simon Diamond and ECW, is that correct?
Yeah, and that just came about just out of the blue too. I'd been working with a company maybe 3 months, just doing single matches with everybody, no real angle or feud or anything. And one night, Tommy Dreamers came in. He said, "Do you want to wrestle Simon Diamond, or do you want to tag with him and go against two of Dusty's guys?" I said, "I think we should tag. I think that," and man, we just had chemistry right off the bat. We did a promo in the back, and Paulie loved it, and he said, "You guys are going to be a hot act for me," and he was right. He really got behind us there for a good amount of time.
Now, did you stay there in ECW until the doors closed?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I thought you did.
I was there until the end, and man, I had a verbal contract that was better than my WCW contract, and man, it all came crashing down there around March, April 2001. But yeah, I think I could have used another good year there, and I think that would have really propelled me to much higher status. But what can you do?
Yeah. Now, how was it to be with such a popular company like ECW as it came to an end? What was the mood like there?
Well, that's the funny thing about it is we did the best houses the company ever did in its entire existence. Just what got ran up before that. I mean, we were in Chicago and LA doing 6,000 people, and the company never did crowds like that before. So the company was still hot from a fan perspective, but nobody will ever know what the numbers were back then, other than what we heard is that the thing was way in the red, and it just couldn't make a comeback.
Yeah. Now, let's back up to the WCW days. If I remember correctly, you had a match with Chavo Guerrero on the Blockbuster Nitro that took place in July of '98 at the Georgia Dome. Now, of course, as most people know, that's the episode where Goldberg defeated Hollywood Hogan for the WCW Championship. Tell us what it was like to be on that show.
Well, I always remember that one because that's got to be the biggest crowd, right? I mean,
right.
42,000 people there, and here's the thing. I remember walking out to they had that the ramp you go down, where you come through the entranceway.
Yeah. And
just to see that amount of people, and then I'll always remember how long it took me to get to the ring. And I got about halfway down to the ring. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane, And I got up to the ring, And when I look at the hard camera, I just kind of realized this is pretty big, because if all these people are here, how many millions are watching this on TV? And it just kind of goes through your mind.
Sure.
I'm sure if you talk to other guys that have been in situations like this, imagine how many people are watching this. And then, we found out afterward that it was one of the highest rated TV shows ever for wrestling.
Right. Exactly.
For ratings wise. And it's like, man, that's, to be a part of that's a pretty cool thing. And a lot of people remember it. I still live in Atlanta, so I actually have people come up to me, hey, I was at that show in '98, you know what I mean? So that was pretty cool. I'd say that was the biggest WCW show ever, as far as ratings, and it did $1 million in ticket sales at the Dome.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
A 3-day advance. Because if people remember, they announced that on Thursday on the Thunder that was what was going to happen on Monday, and in those 3 days, they sold those 43,000 tickets, and so that was, I think that's a pretty big event in the history of wrestling, and just, the fact that I got to be on that card is, absolutely, probably the biggest thing I ever did.
Yeah, that was huge. No doubt made history with that one. Now, how about your run with the WWE? Who contacted you? Tell us about that experience a little bit.
Well, I was still with TNA at the time, and this was in early 2005. And I had a really good deal. I had a really good run in TNA for 2 years. But they switched. Dusty had come in and started booking, and I was in the middle of something with Disco. We were doing a tag team as the New York Connection, and Russo liked us a lot and was giving us a really good push on TV. And then just for some reason, they decided they were going to give Dusty control of everything. And I'll just, whether Dusty's alive or not, I'll just tell the truth. Dusty pulled me aside and said, I don't like Glenn, baby. I don't like him. And he took us off TV. And I was under a contract for a pretty good amount of money per night, like per show. Mm-hmm. But if I wasn't booked on the show, I didn't get paid anything. So I found myself at home for about 2 or 3 months with no pay. But wow. Under contract, and I'm calling Dusty, I'm calling Jeff Jarrett. I'm like, Jeff, I got a 1-year-old here. I got a wife and a baby. You guys either got to use me or you got to release me from this contract. It was a big, because I knew I could at least go work independence. You know what I mean?
Right.
And Tommy Dreamer, who was my boss in ECW and also a good friend, had just taken a job with WWE in office capacity where he was going to be in charge of a lot of talent relations as John Laurinaitis' assistant, and he was in charge of developmental, which was Ohio Valley Wrestling at the time. And he called me and said, hey, Christian, who I broke in with and who Tommy was friends with, said, hey, Christian told me they're not using you, but you're under a deal. I said, yeah. I was like, he goes, well, I'm going to be opening up this new developmental in Georgia, and if you get out of your contract, I can sign you. And I'm like, okay. So I went and had jumped through a lot of hoops at TNA to get out of that contract, but eventually they let me out of it. Jeff Jarrett let me out of the contract, and I signed with them immediately. And they opened the Deep South, it was called, in McDonough, Georgia, with Jody Hamilton was in charge of it, and Bill DeMott was doing the training, and that's how I got signed with WWE in 2005.
Well, Johnny, I like to play the name association game during my interviews. Okay, so I'm going to say a name. I'm going to say a name to you. You can give me a one-word answer if you wish, or you're welcome to elaborate if it's a topic that piques your interest. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right, Jeff Jarrett.
Smart businessman.
All right, Paul Heyman.
Smart wrestling man, not a smart businessman, no.
All right, UCW owner Ron Gossett.
Definitely a smart businessman. You can really get wrestling going the way it used to be, I think, and have it draw.
All right, Eric Bischoff.
Helped, basically okayed me getting my first break in wrestling, so nothing bad to say about Eric.
All right, lastly, the current state of independent professional wrestling.
I think it's on the upswing, pardon the pun, and I think I'm at the perfect spot for that because now I got the experience and the background, and I'm still in phenomenal shape and have the look and everything, and I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm 25 years this year, and I'm just getting warmed up. And I think it's going to be really good independence, especially with the all-in pay-per-view with Cody Rhodes and these guys.
Absolutely.
I think I think the territories are kind of coming back. I think everything's coming full circle. And these guys, they said it would 10 years ago, and I think it's happening.
I agree with you.
I think it's coming all the way around back to regional territories again.
I agree with you 100%. I think it is, too. I'm very, very excited about independent wrestling right now. UCW, one of those companies on a major upswing here, so I'm very, very excited to see where things go. And you bring up a great point there, the territories. We are kind of seeing that a little bit now, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And along with the other independents that I'm doing, there's a few others that I work for that are in different areas, and they're drawing upwards too. Their crowds are going up, and it's just there's a lot of talent out there. And Vince McMahon, he can't tie everybody up, man. You know, like a guy like Carlito that I've been wrestling in UCW. To me, that guy could still be WWE champion. It's just Vince he cherry-picked the guys that he wants for now, but there's a lot of talent left out there for other people to use, and I think that's what's happening. Other people are going, hey, we can make some money with this wrestling business done right, and there's enough talent. There's still a fan base out there. There's old fans that want to come back, and I think it's a really good time for wrestling, independent, all the way up to WWE.
Well, Johnny, thank you so much for doing this interview with me, and good luck on your upcoming UCW show on August the 25th.
Yes, sir.
And as a reminder to fans, you can see Universal Championship Wrestling on Saturday, August the 25th in Athens, Georgia for Slamboree. Visit the UCW website at ucwtv.com. Again, that's ucwtv.com for more information about the show, to purchase your tickets. Also, be sure to go follow them on social media, UCW TV, Instagram, and on Twitter. Again, Johnny, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you.
Same here, Steven, man. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, man. Take care.